Hello and welcome back to the Rocknrollsailor journal. We're in my secret laboratory location. And what do you do once you write a book? First you publish it, then you turn it into an ebook, and you go and tell everybody about it, you go and do readings, and then in order to prepare for the readings you basically gotta spend time rehearsing it anyway. So why not turn it into an audio book and maybe a podcast while you're at it? So that's what we're doing. As usual, it's the middle of the night. It's 3:10 local time. And as usual, I'm wide awake. Now, when you're sleepless at night, there's two things you can do. You can either go and pop pills and wreck your health completely, or you can try and adapt to it, because in my book, your biorhythm is your personal rhythm, and that is your survival beat. That is the tune that everything else in your life has got to adapt to, not the other way around. Otherwise you ain't going to sing, you're going to croak. Okay, so the basic idea is we got a microphone set up, we got a freeware program to do the recording, and we got the copy. And we're going to start off. Well, last night I did a test read of Greenstein, which is absolutely excellent. I did two. It's going to take a third one, but not tonight. Tonight we're going to start with episodes of the story of both. This trippy novel that I wrote last year while I was sailing through Holland. And you know those moments when the woman you love hands you an empty notebook and a pen and says absolutely nothing? Special sacred moments. A couple of weeks after she done that, I was for anchor at the boat up in the north of Holland. It was raining. She was reading. I just took that empty book, didn't say anything, and just started writing. And this came out. I gotta switch on the recording, huh? And there we go. That microphone a bit closer. Early days. These standers aren't friendlies. He's been through days where they stood wide apart, and high waving greens hid both him and the four-footed ones. Some and often would let you climb in for a hazardless shelter, when the dark enveloped all again and the howling and the hooting heralded fangs and silent wings. Some and others would let light play through in myriad colors that made the seers in his face water with joy and strange pleasantness under his hair, and even between his runners, where the little good-for-nothing drizzler would rise and stand straight like the big rocks he'd seen men buried under. But not these. These standers grabbed at him, tore at him, ripped him till the red of death dripped through his thin fur. These weren't friendlies. The rage was upon him, panting and screaming as he hurled his taut self through the dark miasma of green and brown shadows, cracking and slapping at him, tripping him up with their unmoving feet. Sliding and falling, he growled and groveled through the bush, and then all started crying. He'd noticed long away when he wasn't so much, and little drizzler never rose bigger than the points of his grabbers, that when everything cried, it tasted like the jumping and running water that all put their mouth into. Yet when he cried, it tasted strong and bitter and hard, almost like you could bite it, and somewhat like the rolling water plane whose frightening edge was early being him with them. And the old, who soon after stopped walking, had raised a grabber across the vast expanse and hit him hard, picked him up off the rocks, and with starshot gaze made him taste both sea and tear, and pushing him towards the rising land made him man. They weren't friendlies. The pouring, the pounding, the streaking, screaming, scolding, screeching, cracking, flaming, all was rage around him, and he joined in, a rhythm of blood, pumping legs, jumping branches, beating mud, running as tears salted the rain, and raw fear rolled out like thunder. The big stander was waiting for him, different, as he birded himself through the thinning, fiendish and foul, knowing no sure-footedness lay beyond the tall and alone. And even that was moving, picking up his feet and long sinuous seekers staring out of the rocks, as he hurled himself into the vanishing safety of his thick and many arms laden with heavy green nesting. They both tumbled into nothing as the sky fire split the world, cutting before and after apart like a howler's bite. Hello again. So I've been messing around with this track on the program, and it turns out it sucks. It's just like like I'm talking through a fish tank. So I don't know. Maybe it's the microphone. I'll see. We'll dive into the next piece of reading and see if this makes a difference. It's a beautiful, lovely autumn storm going on out there. It's like blowing all over the place. Absolutely magnificent. There we go. Nothing into something somewhere every time he found he'd stop moving for a while. The gushing rains made way for a sloshing of water through the arms of the fallen big stander. As he crouched between two, the feeling was not of earth, and his sharp disbelief it brought back the floaty, warm feeling of first being. Before first pain and sharp light brought upon him his first own sound, the scream of heartfelt helplessness amidst the smell of red. They were on a big nothing of water, not easy and calm, but breaking, tumbling, and beating through wounds in the crusted land, rumbling and shouting as it was fighting with the rocks, hitting them against each other like the horrid eaters had done with the heads of those he'd been with in times away, their eyes like glowing coals as they drank the red from the cracks in their skulls till they fell from something into nothing, as he did again. The slapping, tapping sound, friendly now, like the chittering winged ones, who outdid their size by their numbers and sound, as they nest in the hiding nooks of bushes. There were none. Just a rustling of water through the branches that the big stander hadn't lost in the fall or sacrificed in the fight between rocks and water. His feet were all but gone and quite stumped, as they pointed the way the nothing of water was taking them. Brown like mud came from his hole that all have, and he watched it float and drown past the branches as he rubbed his arse upon the leaves so the brown wouldn't stick. He'd known those with two holes and no drizzler, and they were dangerous more often than not. Some small tail and little leg things moved, and he grabbed and bit and swallowed and bit again, and red dripped, and he licked it from him, 'cause red is life, unless it's yours dripping without relent. That's why the two-legged with the two holes were dangerous. They could ooze red and not stop being. They have the power of red. And sometimes they don't ooze for long, and when they do, they scream out a being with it that joins in the scream and becomes. Drifting on a vast expanse of nothing water, he befriends the floating stander and nests, gazing into what has been. Okay, sweeties, where were we? Oh yeah. You just come from the wild, wild rapids into the gentle water. Yes, yes, and then here we continue. It's a funny feeling laying at anchor. The boat's moving and yet going nowhere except in a slow semicircle, left to right, right to left. And you can hear the water flowing fast, and on a tidal stream at springtide it's really rushing, while the anchor braves its force at the end of a taut chain and rope. Though at ease, you feel the constant need to check your bearings and alertly jump into action should you feel the low tug of a crabbing safeguard. Once I was awakened by the thumping horn of a passing freighter whilst drifting through a shipping lane, and I spent the next hour being guided back to safe anchorage over VHF and the rest of the night dozing off over the helm. Is it only the mistakes we make that make us feel fortunate for surviving them? Lucky if we fail to repeat them? Blissful in the face of glowing success? This whole game of trial and error which we call survival, and in which we are all game to the ominous plentiful throngs, fangs, claws, lists and traps of the great equalizing force of death, that binds us like nothing else to a lust for life, that will even forgive tedious waiting in line, dull soul-numbing slave wagery, and endless repetition of whose turn of control over the remote or task of doing the dishes, whose life, if not shared, how shared, if not ruptured and broken, entwined and drowsed with sorrow, laughter, and despair, that makes us cling to a belief in tomorrow, even just for tomorrow's sake. We are so bound by love, and will kill to prove it. The nights are so much stronger than the daytimes in which all is visible and plain. Not much left to the imagination except stale realism hounding us into daydreams just to get away and breathe some colors. I know not what I am, therefore I create and recreate myself. Thus some constant self-destruction haunts me like the closest of shadows, the ghost of madness and well-being, the thousand ones I may, might, have, shall, be, am, me. Same for you and how we meet. Clusters of ourselves engaging, raging, raping, loving, debating, sedating, giving, taking, while all we do is say hello. And perhaps goodbye, and we leave each other knowingly unknown, with pieces, fragments exchanged, and trailing in the wind like pollen for a future and fallen leaves of yesteryears. The nights tell stories, and we write them down, paint, sculpt, drink, TV them, fuck them like whores and lick them like lovers, carefully lay them to sleep like children that may not even be ours, but need a cover and a cuddle and a light on down the hall. We sing the stories and eat them alive, dancing to digest the days in which we, coward and hero, slave and commander, idiot and savant, claim to know what it is we're doing here. What for and to what end, and why this way and not that. And we bicker and battle to the safety of the dark and lonely realm of shadows and stars, whereas there's not the one sun close by, but many far, far away.